The Me&Him podcast. G'day Dad, back again, Me&Him podcast. How you going?
Oh, not too bad. It's been a rather eventful day, son.
Well, I can tell because I'm looking at the studio here. You're still in your dressing gown. What's happening?
A long story, but I got so many phone calls today and texts. Probably got a week's worth.
Oh, wow.
And
okay. Popular guy.
I was relaxed anyway, and by the time it got to mid-afternoon, I thought, what's the point? Only my son can see me, and then he outed me first thing.
Yeah, that's
How about
right.
that?
I've got the video already in mind how I'm going to present this on YouTube. That's
Thank
all right.
you.
At least you got the dressing gown on, right? I'd be more worried if you didn't have that.
Oh, well, look, we're trending in the direction where you're going to die sooner than me.
Oh, really? Oh, right. Okay, I'm just setting myself up for a fall, am I? No worries.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, you had lots of calls. I understand you may have not had a close call as well.
Well, a good friend of mine who was repairing some equipment came across yesterday, and we had a little bit of social time and so forth. And then he left, and about an hour afterwards, another friend of mine who had spent a period of about 2 months in self-isolation because he had open heart surgery. And as I said to him, I said, Peter, your body has repaired more quickly than your psychology.
Right.
But thank God you're out and about. The first friend who repaired my equipment sent me a text this morning saying, oh, by the way, Matt, I've just tested positive for COVID.
Yes, it's doing the rounds again at the moment.
So I'm 80, and for 5 hours after he left, I entertained a friend of mine who had open heart surgery.
Oh, man. It's the whole trifecta.
Duty called. I gave myself a SARS test, which turned out to be brilliantly negative. And I rang the various people whom I'm associated with to let them know of the circumstances and what I consider to be a very low level of potential threat, but it's best to inform people as quickly as possible so they can make their own decisions.
Oh, totally. Look, that's cool. I know we're going to do a recording, but you got to prioritise these things, and here we are now, a little bit later on in the day, and you're still alive and kicking when in your dressing gown.
Sandy Stone. That's whom I'm impersonating.
Who's Sandy Stone?
Sandy Stone was one of the 3 brilliant characters that Barry Humphries created.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sandy Stone was in his dressing gown, and he was talking from the afterlife, and he was still complaining.
There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, no.
Well, I'll say it was a beautiful day here. I managed to actually, it's almost winter, almost fully fledged June winter, and I managed to have a swim, a run, feel good. Probably had a lot more changes of clothes than you have today. Well, but ready to chat, ready to share stories around obviously your journey, background. Any insights, any esoteric, crazy thoughts that come to mind as we go? You ready for that?
I'm ready. Son, give it to me.
Button up your dressing gowns, folks. This is going to be a good one. Yay! The Me&Him podcast. So we've been taking a bit of a meandering journey through your childhood experiences, as well as some of mine, I guess, as well, through school and getting into intermediate and to university and the party days, the halcyon party days by the sounds of things we talked about last episode. But we've come to a point now where I know a little bit about the circumstance, but I don't know anything about the detail about how you met Mum. How you met my mum. So I do remember you saying, super beautiful lady, looked like Elizabeth Taylor, which all sounds amazing. And I'm sure she'll like to hear it when she listens back. She'll be like, yeah, that sounds correct. But yeah, tell me now, I'd love to just understand more about the circumstances of how you came together and I guess any other detail that helps to fill in a few blanks.
Well, at university in that time in the 60s, they had a men's common room and a woman's common room. And then they decide, because it was the 60s and equality and all that sort of stuff, that they'd have a mixed common room.
Oh, wow. So progressive.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was at those days.
That's amazing, isn't it? When you think about it, like that's what 60 years ago now, maybe, or 50 something. And it was like, oh, here's an idea. We can co-ed a common room at university. Like, wow.
Yeah. So there was, and also the mood of the times with Beatlemania and so forth was that teenagers and young people who wanted to mix with each other attended coffee shops.
Well,
So this is in the city precinct. And coffee became very, very fashionable at the time. And it was an excuse for young people to get together.
right.
And also some of the coffee shops were associated with licensed facilities, and there were bands playing.
Cool. All right. That sounds pretty urban. Like, sounds quite...
Well, it was
advanced.
adventurous for the times.
Okay.
That didn't really happen that way in the 50s. And so they actually set up in the university a coffee shop as well,
Okay.
which was distinct from these 3 other common rooms that I talked about.
And did the common rooms have coffee? Like, where they had the
Oh, you
basic
could get
facilities?
your coffee and take it up.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Gotcha.
The common rooms were meeting rooms, you know.
Gotcha, yeah.
They were originally intended as study rooms.
Yep.
But
Makes sense.
they became meeting rooms. And I had noticed your mother. I didn't realize she noticed me. And she was talking with a group of girls, some of whom I knew. And, you know, I said hello. And she was dating a German fellow at the time. And his name rhymed with an expression in English. And I won't name him for obvious reasons. And I said, sounds like a load of bullshit to me. Which didn't go down well with the woman I wasn't courting at that time.
Well, they call that nowadays, they call that negging, where you kind of have a little slight dig and get their attention.
Oh, I got the attention, all right.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't pleasant.
No, fair enough, but you were noticed. That's something.
Anyway, the big movie those days was Anthony and Cleopatra, with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. And your mum did look a lot like Elizabeth Taylor, the way she did her makeup and everything, and very black, noticeable eye makeup, and she had her hair dyed black as well. And the university ran a competition, which was called a Miss Cleopatra competition.
Right, based on that movie, the theme.
It was a big movie
Right.
those days. And both of them were big stars who, prior to that movie, were married to other people, and during that movie fell in love. Yeah,
Right.
So huge stories in the papers actually, and on the radio. Those were the primary means of communication amongst everyday people. And it turned out that your mother won.
Oh, good on Mum.
And I remember seeing the parade down the middle of Queen Street, which was like Elizabeth Street is to Melbourne. And there was your mother sitting on I can't remember the make of the car, but it was a coupe, open top.
Right.
And, you know, waving
So
to
sort of
her
the belle of the
adoring
ball
masses.
by the sounds of things here.
Oh, yeah, she was. No, that was a big deal.
Wow.
And a hell of a lot of guys at university wanted to be with Miss Cleopatra because, you know, she was quite spectacular.
Well, that's. I do find that quite interesting because just knowing how hard it is or how much males compete, I guess, for female attention. It's hard enough when you're in a bar or you're, you know, across the room from someone and you know there's a couple other single guys you're in competition with. Different thing when she's going down a float in the middle of the main street, you know, and everyone's standing around going, man, look at chick. Not saying I should have said that about my mum, but, you know, like...
The whole engineering school were in lust over her.
Right.
I mean...
Hot ticket, Mum. Well done.
Two-thirds of the males.
Right.
Anyway, I had something going with another young lady in the flatting complex that I was in. And one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Jim. He was always a bit of an entrepreneur. And he said to me, I've got a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
He said, how would you like to go out with Miss Cleopatra? And I said, bullshit,
Right.
Jim.
He
Come
teed
on.
something up.
She's never going to want to go out with me. I mean, everybody else wants her.
Wow.
And he said, well...
With friends, I tell you, that's the kind of friend I need. Good on you, Jim.
And he floored me with this next statement. It's that she says she wants to go out with you.
There we go. Wow. So she in essence made the first move.
Effectively, because I was still hung up. I didn't realise how handsome I was until decades later when your sister told me. And so I said, really? And you remember Bayswater, son?
Bayswater.
On the shore?
Not really.
Okay. Well, it's part of the North Shore,
Okay.
Auckland Harbour, on the other side from the city. And the Bayswater dance was, everybody knew about it, and everybody tried to go. So I rang Miss Cleopatra.
Wow. Okay. Do you have to speak to her dad and stuff and get permission, or just
no mobile phones those days?
I know. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, called the home, or was she flatting?
Yeah, I did. No, she wasn't flatting at that stage, and I got a warm reception.
Okay.
So we organised to go to the Bayswater dance.
Well, hang on. Weren't you with someone else? You're saying, or are you just?
Oh well, I had a dalliance with one of the girls in the flat,
all right, but it wasn't fixed. All right, I'm with you. All right, that's uni. Yeah. Fair enough.
No, it
60s free love. Let's go.
It was just two people scratching itches, you know.
Okay.
And a mate of mine, John Spate, had a girlfriend, and he had a big 40s Plymouth. These things were the size of a small truck. And the back seat, you could fit 5 people on it.
I remember those big cars. There was still a bunch of them around when I was a youngster.
Yeah, from the 40s.
Big bench seats. And
so he and his girlfriend picked us up. And we live in a PC world, don't we?
Yeah, well, just be careful. Like, you know, I mean, there's a few words there that be red rags to bulls.
We kind of held hands in this huge back seat.
Held hands.
Yeah, I have to say that because there are too many wokes around.
Yeah. How about you say we hooked up?
We were better friends by the time we got to the dance. But let's put it that way.
Well, okay. So hang on a minute. You had people driving that car while you were in the back seat?
It's a huge bloody car.
No way. So hang on. I'm just trying to, I don't just want to picture anything, but so your friend and his girlfriend driving the car and you're in the back seat, big car, so to speak, but cars are only so big, right? They're not talking a stretch Hummer here, you know. Okay. Okay. What happens in the Plymouth stays in the Plymouth.
Yes, it did.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you go to this party.
The dance. And so by the time the dance was finished and we went home, she didn't go back to her place. She accompanied me to my place.
Okay.
And
were you
where it all began. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I think we did come close to some gory details there. So thank you for, you know, pulling.
No, they weren't gory. I can tell you that.
Okay. Holding hands. So that's how you met. Wow. It does sound kind of classic 60s sort of. Almost like the burger joint roller skates.
It happened in the 60s, for Christ's sake.
I know. That's why it's classic, right? But not everyone had that experience, right?
I think it was about early 64.
Wow. And, you know, when it comes down to it, without that meeting, without that greeting, without good old Jimbo, I wouldn't be here. So thanks. Thanks for taking that the invitation.
I'm trying to assess the quality of that.
What's that? No, you must be very grateful about that fortuitous opportunity that could bring forth such joy into the world.
I love your sense of humour, son.
Well, you got to own it, right? Well, thanks for that. A little bit of an update there. Hopefully, Mum won't lose her nana when she hears it. Oh, my God.
Why do you think I was so careful about expressing it?
Yeah. All right. We'll see how we go on the edit on that one.
We don't want 5 million people ringing up.
Yeah, it's one thing to get lawyers on our back. It's another thing for my mum. the
I
ex-wife.
said we held hands, right?
Yeah, I know. It was all very PC. Well done, Dad. I'm impressed. I could see you steam coming out of your ears trying to keep that in the PC lane. So I think you passed. You passed. So let's keep it moving. The Me and Him podcast. So, Dad, one of the things that has come up, it comes up very often when we speak, is the subject of spirituality. I wasn't raised in a particularly religious environment, but when I say I wasn't raised in a religious environment, Mum was a spiritualist and you were, and also, by all means, followed Buddhist sort of philosophies.
A party animal.
I don't know if that's a religion.
It's the better description.
The religion of...
That's a pretty holy, divine calling.
It is. It's like a god of the nightclubs. But look, the reason I bring it up is because I think without spirituality of some ilk, something greater than ourselves, life can be pretty hard to navigate because you can't work it all out yourself. You've got to have some faith in the bigger picture. You've got to have some tools that you can draw on to stay on track. I don't mind, some people, friends of mine are Christians, Catholics, Protestants, Buddhists. I don't really care. Atheists, it doesn't matter to me. It's all about what do you need, or what do we need to help us along the way, and whatever fits the fit for purpose we use. And the reason I bring that up is last episode we were talking a little bit about Joseph Goldstein, who I've been listening to on a podcast, who is part of the Be Here Now Foundation, which was founded by Ram Dass and his colleagues back in the day, 60s, I believe. And you have had a lot to do with me getting into that over the years. In fact, you sent me tapes, you sent me a copy of his book, etc. So tell me a little bit more, and maybe tell the listeners too, who is Baba Ram Dass? Because a lot of people think it's just a bunch of gibberish. It doesn't mean anything. Because it's a great story, right, of who this guy is, and then how he went on to make such a difference in the Western world.
Well, it links into Timothy Leary.
And you've got to explain who he is too, I think.
The so-called high priest of LSD.
Okay.
And he got as much bad press as Freud got about sex.
So you got to. Sorry, I don't mean to interject. I know I asked the question, but Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who later to become Baba Ram Dass, were both Harvard psychologists, correct?
Yeah, they were professors of psychology in Harvard, and they became drinking buddies. Mm-hmm. And Timothy Leary was a bit more adventurous because Richard Alpert came from a Jewish background of high achievement.
Right.
And he says himself, he was a professor about 3 different departments in Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Smart
at the
dude,
time.
Right? Yeah, he also flew planes. He did all sorts of stuff. It was a pretty exciting lifestyle.
Yes. Timothy Leary had gone down to Mexico and come across a psychedelic, a naturally occurring psychedelic. And he came back. He'd ingested it. And he came back and he told his drinking buddy of the experiences that he had, which took him right outside the rigid realm of psychology that is in the academic sphere. And so Richard Alpert got interested, and he didn't quite finish his student license for the aeroplane.
Yes, that's right.
But he said, I've got a plane. And they went down the next break to Mexico, where they ingested various substances. And that caused a paradigm shift in their thinking. Remember, these were high intellectuals at Harvard.
Who were interested in the human mind and the way we think.
Yes. And consciousness and the subconscious and everything else. And they suddenly realized there was an alternate dimensionality that they'd been shown a glimpse of through these agents. And this is where the whole LSD thing came into being. And they tried to explain these breakthroughs because at that point you had the ego and the subconscious, which came out of classical psychology. And they found something that didn't fit the scholastic paradigm of the time. And they were young and adventurous, and they wanted to learn more in order to incorporate it into the body of work.
Like break new ground,
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't know if you've been following lately, but the research on psychedelics has all kicked back into gear again how many years later are we now? 70 years, 60 years later.
It's 60 years later, yes.
Yeah, and it's actually, scientific studies are being conducted and all the stuff that they got panned for, which I don't want to sort of steal the limelight here, but it didn't go too well in the end because they weren't very scientific, were they? Timothy Leary,
they got thrown out of Harvard.
They were taking the drugs with the students, going on the same journeys.
No, it wasn't quite that.
Well, in Timothy Leary's book, he talks about doing that.
You've got to understand the politics of the time. It was the Richard Nixon era, very conservative.
War on drugs too, I think, wasn't it?
And he'd appointed a guy called Harry Anslinger, and he was the first head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Right.
And he was a religious zealot. Mm-hmm. You got thrown into prison for being caught with a joint of marijuana.
Right. It was a gateway drug,
it was that bad. Oh, yeah. It was like the McCarthyism of the 50s, a conservatism so radical that it destroyed careers of noble people anywhere and everywhere. You can Google McCarthyism and Harry Anslinger and you'll find out all the details. But
back to Bubba Ram Dass, or then Richard Albert.
He was sufficiently moved, well, actually, got thrown out of Harvard. So he decided to go on a journey to India where there were tales of saints and mystics and so forth. And he took along a whole lot of drugs. He had a heap of them.
No TSA or airport security worried about that at those days.
No. And to cut a long story very short, he met a guy from Laguna Beach, California, tall, American, blonde hair, who became his first spiritual advisor, who taught him how to eat correctly, mainly vegetarian, and who had a guru up in the hills somewhere. And anyway, this guy from Laguna Beach who actually was, teaching him meditation and, really good things, and not drug-related at all, and awakening a spiritualism in him, took him up to meet this old man. And when he got there, he fell at the feet. I mean, the tall, blonde guy from California, at his guru's feet, and he was crying, etc. And Richard Alpert, as he was then, was still fairly skeptic. And then this little guru guy turned his eye on him and said, "Oh, you come by car?" Yes. And he'd borrowed a friend's, we'll call it a Land Rover, but it was a rough terrain vehicle. And he said, "Oh, you give me car?"
I remember that, yeah.
And Richard Alpert was really screwed up.
He's like, "No, it's my friends."
This weird little, fat little guy wants to have a car. He said, "No." And then they took him away and they fed him and they gave him time to meditate and so forth. The next time he was taken to meet the guru, he said, "Oh, your mother." And Richard Alpert's mother had died a year or so beforehand. She died, and he thought, how the hell can this guy know about my mother dying?
Yeah, because they just randomly shown up to this village in the mountains.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
And he said, she die of, and he said the Hindu word for spleen, and it was translated by one of the disciples, and she died of cancer of the spleen. So that really screwed him over.
Yeah,
he thought
too much to take in. How
what kind of FBI conspiracy is this?
Yeah, exactly right. Like, how's this possible? He'd know this. Has someone spoken to him? Because I haven't spoken to anyone. And your mind's racing at this point, right?
Yeah, and then they took him back crying to the place that they had for him, and he was given a teacher who taught him the ways of this form of spirituality, and eventually the little old fat guy became his guru, and he became Ram Dass.
And this is the Maharaji, right?
No, it's not a Maharaji. It was just a guru. It's got nothing to do with the Maharaji, Maharishi, or anything like that. He was a fake. He was the one associated with the Beatles.
All right. So Ram Dass eventually he gets given that name, doesn't he? And then he comes back to the West. He writes this book, which I believe he was asked to write by his guru. And
no, he wasn't. He wanted to explain his life to we in the West and at the same time give us the sequence of transitions he had to go through to get to where he was at the time he wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he became a Hindu mystic from that point, and he spent an enormous amount of his time working with the dying, helping people who were terminally ill to come to terms with it all and have a better passage into whatever the next dimension is.
So for the listeners out there, Google Baba Ram Das, or maybe YouTube, some of his talks.
Google Be Here Now.
Or Be Here Now is the book. I personally got a lot just out of listening to him and his irreverent, but so deep and so just, it felt like the truth, what he was speaking, but it was from such a high plane that it didn't feel like anyone was preaching to you, but it certainly gave me, it was like a bit of a rudder for how I looked at the world once I started to absorb his perspective, I guess. It's because it wasn't really a religious thing. It was more of just sharing an insight into ways of living and ways of being.
Son, you probably don't know this, but I saw him up close and personal 2 or 3 times.
Oh, no, I'm jealous. I tell you what, I want to hear about that. And let's do it straight after this. The Me&Him podcast. I do remember you saying that you had met Baba Ram Das or gone to see him or what have you, and I'm so jealous. I would love to have seen him. I've listened to him a lot, and he sounded like a beautiful character. Tell me more. What was the first time like? Or how did that happen?
The first time was more relaxed. It was in a festival setting, where you're sitting on the grass and that sort of thing. And he was very close, like 12, 15 feet away.
Wow. And this is in Auckland, is it?
No, it was in New Zealand, of course.
Yeah, okay.
But it was in where they have festivals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there were 2 other occasions, both in the Auckland Town Hall. And at the end of one of them, we all had an opportunity to come up and say something to him. And there was a long queue.
I bet.
And the interesting thing, son, I love the man, and I was deeply engaged by him and his work, etc. And as I shuffled forward in the queue, I started to, inside myself, feel so unworthy.
I was going to ask you this, funny enough. Okay. Yeah.
By the time I got to him...
Frozen up?
Because when I started at the back of the queue, I was, oh, wow, I'm going to meet the man, you know?
Yeah, all enthusiastic.
Wow, I'm really looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the weight of my, let's call them sins, in this Christian-coloured world, but whatever they were, I just realised I hadn't done enough work. And there was so much work to go. And who was I to shake the hand of such an incredible being? So when I finally got to the front of the queue, and I was just a few feet away from him, and he was smiling, of course, I said, thank you very much. And I turned and left. I didn't feel worthy enough to spend even 2 minutes with him.
Look, in all fairness, it can be intimidating at the best of times when you've got someone who's, despite the fact he probably didn't want to be seen as above anyone, the fact is you're all there listening and being impressed, and you can't help but elevate him. So it's not unnatural to be questioning your own sense of worth when you've...
Yeah, but the issue here, son, was what was questioning my sense of worth. And it was coming from a deep place inside me.
Right.
It wasn't a mental equation. There were no, logical circuits whirring around inside and colliding with each other. It was...
I guess it's almost like a mirror, because he would...
Yeah, correct. And by... You've nailed it, son. By engaging with him, I would be staring at my naked nothingness.
Wow.
And I didn't have the guts to do it.
Wow. That's full on. And of course, he would have seen you just as another loving being.
No, he would have seen everything.
Sort of everything, yeah. Yeah, what an amazing guy. And I know that we've probably, this episode's featured. There's the Bubba Rum Dust episode. I'm sure he'll come up a bunch more as well. I do think
men do need to connect with their spirituality, by the way.
And that's why I think it's worth bringing it up now. And let's go deeper down that line in episodes
some other
to
time.
come.
Sure.
I do thank you for sharing him with me. And I will tell you just one quick story on my own. I was having a really difficult night one night when I was younger. I was struggling with a lot of different things, and I couldn't sleep. I was restless, and I remember ringing you, and because you always said ring me whenever. I think I rang you at like 2 a.m. or something like that, and you were pleasant and kind and all the rest. But then you said, "Son, just do me a favor, listen to those tapes I gave you." And I was like, tapes? Yeah, that's right. You did give me tapes. And I was like, I don't know if that's going to help me, listen to tapes, whatever. So I ended up, after our chat, I can't remember how long we chatted for, but I went downstairs and I found these tapes, and they were in a thing under the TV cabinet, and I put one in. I started listening to it, and oh my golly gosh, I think that's when I truly fell in love with the man and his message. It brought me right down from this place of high anguish and confusion.
Yep.
To this place of centeredness and almost just deep humility, and I knew everything was okay at that point. And I ended up going to sleep after I listened to, I think, 2 of those tapes, maybe 2 hours worth. And at that point, he became, I guess, my guru. Like that's when I felt, okay, I need to hear more of this stuff in my life.
I'm just guessing now, but my guess is that tape helped you to forgive yourself.
I think so. I think so.
No, you hadn't committed any sins.
No.
I'm talking about a level of forgiveness that is very spiritual.
Yeah, and there's also just something about his voice as well. So, look, highly recommend YouTubing him, listen to some of his lectures. You don't even have to watch the YouTube, you can just listen to it or find a podcast. There's also Joseph Goldstein as well, which is, as I say, a bit of his, not his protege, but certainly feels on brand with that sort of teaching as well. And very much more Buddhist leaning, I think, for Goldstein. But as I agree with you, Dad.
But that's fine.
Yeah, totally. Spirituality, no matter what form it comes, no matter how you approach it, just knowing there's something bigger, that greater, there's something, some things will just work out and you can't control them, and you've got to accept them and you've got to be thankful. And if you can welcome that sort of mindset into your life in any degree, your life, I think, one-to-one starts to improve to the degree that you welcome it, to the degree that you feel you can handle things better. That's just my 2 cents.
I agree, son.
Cool. Well, more to discuss on that one, no doubt. But yeah, it's been good to share some Bubba Rum Dust stuff with you.
Likewise.
The Me&Him podcast. Well, I actually really enjoyed hearing about that. I'm, as I say, pretty envious that you met Bubba Rum Dust. I do think it's worth exploring more about him and some of the lessons, as well as other sort of topics around spirituality in future episodes. What do you reckon?
I think so, but I think we owe it to anybody who's listening to do some men shed type stuff in between.
Like what?
I don't know, but I mean, we can't get all deep and spiritual.
Make some bicycles for disadvantaged kids, or?
Yeah.
You're in Melbourne, I'm in Sydney. That's going to be tough. But man, you're talking about men's issues here, right?
Yeah, because not every man is going to want to venture into this area. I think all beings do, or beings with either a need or a critical thinking faculty do this at some point in their life.
Yeah.
But, we don't want to bore the crap out of everyone.
Fair enough. I know that it's a bit of a rabbit hole that we both got stuff out of. Well, what I will say, though, Dad, is when it comes to being here now, a lot of men find that on the waves. I find it in the water. A lot find it playing the guitar. I think part of centering and finding one's own sense of peace can come sometimes from activities that one loves, that indulge in.
You're absolutely right, son. Now that I'm so goddamned old, funnily enough, I am enjoying silence. I've spent 65 years being involved in noise and rock and roll and, hi-fi systems and God knows what. I don't turn them on unless I have guests to share them with. Silence, I found in the 60s, isn't an absence of sound. It's the canvas upon which sound is projected, like A painter has a blank canvas and it's not alive until he strokes it with his brushes and puts colours and patterns and light and shade into it.
I've also heard that referred to as the space between the notes that makes the music as well. Yeah. Look, lovely, Dad. Nice to chat. Looking forward to speaking again soon. And
can I be anti-PC?
Yeah, go for it.
It's the space between the nuts that makes the asylum. Sorry.
Space between the nuts. It's the space between us. All right. Been a pleasure. You can stay in that dressing gown all you like, Dad. It's a good catch on.
Just call me Ford Prefect from now on.
Why Ford Prefect?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother episode, Dad.
You got to watch it to understand the significance of the dressing gown.
Oh, my God. Okay. This is the third time I've heard someone mention Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the last 12 months, which basically means I have to now reread the book or watch the movies.
Well, your education has been sadly remiss.
Well, no, I did read it back in the day, but, it looks like that I can't remember the dressing gown, so I've got to refresh my memory.
Actually, just very quickly, if you can find the original TV series from, I think, the late 70s or the early 80s, it is worth watching. Oh, yeah. It is just so good.
Man, I've got so many TV and movie recommendations from these conversations. I've got to take a month off to catch up and then refer back to you.
Oh, this is what Ram Dass says, take a month off.
Oh, there we go. Oh, good advice from the guru. All right, Dad, got to fly.
Okay.
Love you.
See you.
Bye. The Me&Him podcast.